Welcome, everyone. Just give me 1 minute. I am trying to get this live on Instagram as well. Okay, I may have succeeded. All right. Welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Schaefer. Before I get to our case today, a quick reminder. Don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you are watching. And if you find this video to be helpful or know someone who may, hit that share button, hit that save button, drop us a comment, let us know what you like. So I'm very excited about our case today. This was not an easy one. And it brings up a lot of interesting issues that other people out there may be facing themselves. So this client is a native and citizen of Jamaica. She initially came to the US in 2015 to visit a friend with on a B2 visa. And on this trip, she met her future husband. She was visiting a friend in Florida. He lived in Georgia at the time, but was also visiting friends. They spent the whole week together. Things moved quickly, but she had to return to Jamaica where her daughter was, her job was, and in order to comply with the immigration law. So they continued to stay in touch, and eventually she got time off work again in 2017, and she came to visit him with her daughter. And I think she was only around 5 at the time, her daughter. And basically, before she left on that trip, her future husband begged her to stay and proposed to her. And she had told him initially, like, I don't know how I'm going to stay. I have a job. And, he promised he was going to, they would figure it all out, but he really wanted to be with her, blah, blah, blah. So she decided to stay and said that she would marry him. And they did get married a few months later. Before they were married, they did not live together. He was still living in Georgia, where he would come visit her on his days off once a week. And they did move in together after they got married. And like all of these stories with VAWA, everything started off great. Even after they got married, everything was great. But eventually things took an unfortunate turn for the worse. It all started when her husband left his job in Georgia to move to Florida with her. He never really got another full-time job after that. So he was just doing some odd jobs and taking care of the house. But things were still okay then. He actually surprised her in that he went and found a lawyer to file for her green card and everything. We have a question. When doing I-485, I-130, I-765, I-64, how much passport size pictures to submit in total for all the applications together? Well, I'm not really taking general questions right now, but that's an easy one, Damien. You're going to need 10 altogether. You're not filing for an I-131. So 2 of the petitioner, and then 6 for the beneficiary, for the person who's applying for the green card. So 2 for the I-485, 2 for the I-130, and 2 for the I-765. Okay. So, he surprised her, got all the paperwork together, helped her apply for the green card, which she wasn't even thinking about at the time. She was just trying to get her life started with him. And but unfortunately, like I said, things did start to get worse. And a few months after that, after living together, he became excessively protective and jealous and controlling. He cut her off from her family and friends. He didn't want her going out with family and friends, that type of thing. She was then forced to pay all the bills because he didn't get a new job. And at one point, she thought she was pregnant, which she thought he'd be happy about because they had discussed having children together. But he was very mad about it. And that's really when the physical abuse started. He actually put a pillow to her face, sat on her, just really horrible things. And the next morning he was gone and he wouldn't pick up her calls. And it turned out she wasn't pregnant, but he still stayed away from the marital home for a few weeks, and then came back without telling her, and immediately started yelling at her because there wasn't enough food in the house. She had been struggling to pay the bills, and he was not helping. Um, he also then forced her to have sex with him. Quick side note, because this is something that not everyone still knows or knows yet, but just because you're married with someone, it doesn't mean that you can force yourself upon them. The law still considers that rape in this country and many others. So if your spouse does not want to have intercourse with you, then you don't have intercourse with your spouse. So this was very much sexual abuse. It did not matter that they were married. And then she also had to start working overtime because she needed to pay the bills. And like I said, he wasn't contributing. This is also when he started threatening to send her back to her country, to getting her deported. She can only stay there because of him. Honestly, all of the typical things we see in these types of cases. Um, it made her so stressed out that she couldn't eat or sleep, and she lost a lot of weight. And the abuse just continued to get worse. She got promoted at work, and he intentionally would make her late for work, show up at work, cause her problems, and eventually she did lose the job. But again, these are all things done in order to control a person. So when she finally got the interview notice to go to her marriage interview, um, she she's where was I? She went to the marriage interview. She told him this is when the marriage interview is, and then he left again. And he had been leaving increasingly, and we think going to Georgia and then coming back. So when he finally, he also needs to get a new birth certificate. He would refuse to without her paying more money. Eventually, he came back before the marriage interview, and about a week before, they started talking about it. And then he started admitting things to her that she didn't know. I think he drank a little bit. And for example, they had previously talked about if he had any criminal history. And this was very important to her because she did not want to be with someone who had criminal history. She's a religious person. I don't remember her exact religion, if Catholic or Christian, but he had expressed that he was religious too, and even told her parents that. And then he stopped going to church with her. He uh, what was it saying? Oh, the criminal history. Yes, he admitted this criminal history that she didn't know about. And then the real kicker was he told her he had a 1-year-old son. Now, they had been together for more than 1 year, so this was a bit of a shock, and it started to explain a bit more why he was going back and forth so much, even though he didn't have a job anymore in Georgia. But obviously, she was very distraught. But it turned out that she had to reschedule the interview because she had a sinus infection, and they told her she had to come in next week with him. So she told him, okay, the interview's rescheduled for next week, and then he said, I can't go. I have a court date, like a criminal court date in Georgia. Again, she had no idea about any of this criminal stuff. So she went to the marriage interview alone. Now, this is something I want to point out because we also often have this happen. If you're in this situation where you have a marriage case pending and you and your spouse are having problems for whatever reason, and your spouse is refusing to go, she did the right thing. You should still go. If you don't go, it will be denied for abandonment. But it also raises red flags of fraud. But she didn't go with an attorney. And I can't stress enough how important it is in these situations to go with an attorney. And there's multiple reasons. Number one, especially if you already filed for your green card, if we tell them we're filing for a VAWA, we can keep your green card application open. It varies by office how long they keep it open. I've had a client told she had 30 days to file the VAWA, and then they put her in removal proceedings because you have to not just file it, but get the receipt notice. And getting filing and getting a receipt notice in 30 days is pretty tough. So it sometimes we run into problems, but you have the greatest likelihood if you have an attorney there explaining, like, look, this is what's happening with the relationship. This is what we're going to do. Not only that, they do ask you questions, and they asked her a bunch of questions, and it could have caused some really big problems for her. Luckily, we were able to address those. So let's talk about the USCIS interview. The issues that came up from her interview was about how she got to the interview. Now, if you go, I have some videos about what to expect during a marriage interview, what types of questions you'll be asked. One of the questions I talk about is they love to ask you, how did you get to the interview today? And this is true even if you go by yourself. So they asked her how she got to the interview, and she truthfully told them that her car was broken. So she asked her friend to help her find a ride, and her friend told her she found someone for her, and that was going to, she had to pay for it, which she did. And that person drove her, waited for her to finish the interview, and drove her back. Should also point out where she's located in Florida. Her interview was in Alabama, so it was like a 4-hour drive. So when they asked her at the interview, she actually referred to it as a taxi, because in her mind, it was a paid for hire ride. It was a taxi. Well, it was a friend of her. She didn't even know how her friend knew this person. And they started questioning, well, were there markings on the car, blah, 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 blah. And, it was kind of a weird line of questions, but it turned out she was being asked that because the car happened to be registered to the father of her daughter, which she had no idea. She knew he lived in the same city, but not in the same apartment complex, which it turned out that he did. There's thousands and thousands of units, and although he does see the daughter, he would always come to her to pick up the daughter. She had never gone to him, so she didn't know he lived there. And so that was the problem number one. Problem number two was the officer called the husband and said, well, why aren't you here at the interview? And the husband said, I didn't know about it, and hung up. That doesn't look great, but again, that also does hint towards a possible abusive relationship. And then there was this issue of her allegedly being married before to the father of her daughter. So, and this is important because we see this come up a lot as well, that people don't even realize this until they go to their marriage interview or green card interview. But when she applied for her visitor visa to the US, she went to some agency to help her fill out the forms. And they would just ask her questions, she'd answer, they'd fill it out. And, they asked her if she was married, and she said no. And they asked her who she lived with. At the time, she was living with her father, her daughter's father, and she was asked if she was in a relationship. She said they have a child together. They've been living together for over 5 years, and she didn't even know this, but in Jamaica, if you are living with someone for more than 5 years and you carry yourself to the public as being in a relationship, then you're considered common law married. Now, it's not an official thing. You don't get a piece of paper. I think you could if you really wanted to, but she had no idea that this woman that was helping her fill out the forms, when she said to her that she had been living with him for more than 5 years, she checked off that she was married on the visa application. And when she went to the visa interview, they never asked her if she was married, or she would have honestly said, no, I'm not married. So this came up during her interview. And, again, she was very honest about it, and explained it to the officer. Fortunately, after the fact, we were able to get from Jamaica a certificate of no impediment to marriage, which is basically saying, because the problem is this: if she was considered married previously to someone, then she didn't have a divorce, so her marriage to her current husband, who filed the I-130 for her, wouldn't have counted. Basically, it would have been a void marriage, and she would have been ineligible for the green card. So we were able to get an official document from the government saying there's no record of them being married. There was no impediment for her to marry someone new. Um, so after the interview, her husband, things went from worse to horrible. Um, on top of everything he had already done for her, he then maxed out her credit cards and then tried to remove his name from the account. He refused to sign the divorce paperwork. He kept demanding more money. So eventually, she did find a new lawyer and file for VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women's Act, as a self-petitioning abused spouse of a U.S. citizen. And her green card was still open, so we were able to ask them to switch it out. I will get to that a little bit more in a second. She came to us after the initial VAWA was filed, and she got a request for evidence. And I don't remember all of the evidence submitted with the first VAWA filing. I just remember it being pretty inadequate. But part of the reason it was inadequate is there was a lot of evidence that she just didn't have, which again is unfortunately very common with the VAWA case. But there's ways to deal with that. So we addressed all of the issues raised in the request for evidence. The one had to do with she submitted 2 leases, and again, I'm highlighting these issues. I try to keep these videos short, but I'm highlighting this because these are issues I see with a lot of different clients. And so she had 2 leases because they had lived in 2 places together, but her husband refused to sign the first lease. So the issue was raised: why is his name not on there? Because he not just signed it, he wouldn't go to the office, the leasing office, to get his name on it. So we were able to get an affidavit from her roommate, because they did live with another couple, to corroborate the fact that not only did he live there, but that he refused to assist in putting his name on the lease. And this is just another attempt to control the situation. There was also a string of, I don't know if it was a string, but a bunch of text messages submitted between her and her husband. And if I was representing her initially in filing the VAWA, I don't know if I would have included these, because it made it very confusing about their living situation. Because there's messages like, "Oh, I really miss you," type of thing. Like, not even how is your day, but things that was clear they weren't living together. Now, she was always very honest about it. She said he would go back and forth between Florida and Georgia, first because of the job, then, because he would disappear. And we went through the text messages and explained, okay, this he was here, I was there, and we had to go into a lot of detail, because, like I said, you don't just want to submit any evidence that you have just because you're having a conversation with someone or texting, or you even say I love you. It doesn't mean you have a relationship. You need to make sure that all your evidence is consistent. So this did become a potential problem, but fortunately, we were able to deal with it. And then there was some issues with this insurance renewal. So when you submit evidence of your good faith marriage, they want evidence from the time period that you were together. There's a certain point when you file for the VAWA that you're going to say you're separated, or you don't have to be separated, honestly, to file for VAWA, but in most cases, that's what happens. And if you're saying you're separated and you're no longer living together, you're no longer having a joint life together, then they're going to question, why would you submit bills or bank account statements or insurance renewals after your relationship allegedly ended? Well, in her case, her prior attorney said to her, so they did have joint auto insurance while they were married, and they renewed it. And then she tried to remove his name from it, but the insurance company said he needs to call to have his name removed, so she couldn't. And then when it came time to submitting evidence with the initial VAWA, she didn't have the old paperwork that showed during the marriage that showed they had the joint policy. That she only had the renewal paperwork, where they had already broken up. So the old attorney told her to submit it just to show that they actually had the joint insurance to begin with. Now, that's not bad advice. However, if you're going to do that, you should submit it with an explanation, because just submitting the renewal from after they broke up, that looks like you're just trying to submit evidence and you don't really have it. But if she would have submitted that with an explanation, which is what we ended up doing when we responded to the request for evidence, then it's okay, because these things happen. And sometimes it can be very, especially in VAWA cases, she didn't flee the marital home, but in many cases people do, and they're not able to take paperwork. So it's okay. You just have to explain it. And then the other issue was with the health insurance. USCIS claimed you don't need a social security number to get health insurance, which wasn't true. So we just had to address that. I went through with her any additional good faith marriage evidence that we had. We were able to identify a few things. She did have a joint bank account with him and the joint credit cards, both of which were not used much. So the prior attorney said, don't submit, which again is not terrible advice on its face. But when you don't have a lot of evidence and you have a reason why you did not use the joint bank account, he wasn't working, the husband, and B, if she put money in there, it would be gone, which is a lot of times the case. As long as it's explained, then it's a good idea to show, because you're showing, look, she was very much in love with this man, in the beginning, and when they got married and when they filed their case, but he turned out to be a very abusive, horrible person. So the point is, you want to show, look, I was really trying to start my life with this person, but my evidence isn't as good as it could be because of why. And a lot of times, again, related to the abuse. So we submitted whatever we had, explained it, and the VAWA was approved. So I'm going to talk about some of the keys to this case before I talk about what happened after the VAWA was approved, because this client did get her green card. Well, hopefully she got the actual card, but she did get her I-485 approved finally. But there was a few important keys to this case that really distinguished it between a case that could have possibly been denied to a case that got approved. First and foremost was honesty. This client from day one has always been honest about the situation. Even when she went to the interview about where they were living, that things weren't going well, she had always been honest with me. And it was always clear that she really fell for this guy and really did have the proper intention that the immigration law requires. So I always tell clients that you should always be honest, because when you're not, you create more problems for yourself. And because she had some of these issues, like with her alleged prior marriage, things like that, her honesty was really key here, because if she was tried to make anything up, they weren't going to believe her about anything else. The second key to this case is she submitted a really detailed affidavit. It was 20 pages long, and it was not double spaced, single spaced, 20 pages. When people ask me how long these affidavits should be, I always tell them I've had people submit a few pages. I've had 20 plus pages. It honestly really depends on how much you have to explain and how much you need to talk about it. This client was also a good writer, which helps. We worked on her affidavit together. I always work on the affidavits with my clients together, but it does very much help if you're able to remember details and you're able to put it on paper well enough that all I have to do is kind of fix it up. But that's never really an impediment in VAWA cases for us, because I work very closely with clients. But in this case, she made it easy for me. So the details, what's in the details? Well, we started, of course, with how they met, and what their relationship was, how the relationship grew, how she went back and forth. and because he wanted her to come back and then didn't want her to leave. And always remember what they call the five, we learn in elementary school here, the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why. And then really, I guess it's 6 technically, but the 6th one is how, not a W. Whenever you're writing details, who you want to put, where, what happened, when did it happen, why did it happen, how did it happen, as best as you can. And she really did do that. And I've varying levels of it. When clients give me these affidavits, I always push them for more detail. But sometimes people don't remember. Some cases are a lot older than this. But luckily, she had a very good memory. She had details about things that they discussed, things they did together. She even remembered the names of movies that they saw together. So very strong. She talked about what life was like after they got married, what their daily routine was, things that they did together. Then this was also very important, especially when you have the lease issue, when both of you aren't on the lease. She very detailed description about their living situation, including how they had partitioned off a room for her daughter to sleep. But she described the living situation, really specifically, which is key as well. The second key in this case was dealing with the lack of evidence. And as I said before, and you'll hear me say again if you continue to watch my videos, that it is very common in VAWA cases that you're going to be lacking certain evidence and a lot of evidence. The one example being that the joint lease lacked her husband's name on it, and that he kept putting it off. So in her detailed affidavit, every place where there was evidence that she didn't have that she should have had, we explained why. And generally speaking, with VAWA cases, it has to do with the U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse trying to exert control or power over the other person. They don't want to give them the joint accounts and everything. They would rather them not have health insurance, not have a bank account, whatever it is. Not saying it's logical, just saying it is common. And it's okay if this is your situation. It's about explaining it to USCIS. Another key was addressing all of the issues raised in the request for evidence. I talked about that earlier in this video. Specifically, she had to talk about why her visa application had her had her said that she was married, and then we also explained what her relationship was like with her ex, who's her daughter's father, explaining that basically, yes, we were together then, we were married, not married, I'm sorry, they were living together 5 years, had the daughter together, never got married, relationship broke up basically around the time she decided to visit the US, or maybe even a little before. And then the last part of this was the abuse evidence. Now, this is another issue that comes up a lot because a lot of times people in this situation are afraid to call the police. They're afraid to go get medical attention. A lot don't necessarily talk to a lot of people about it. And this was another case where we were lacking in that evidence. But the good news is this, and also no court orders. But the good news is this: you don't need to have that evidence. Does it help? Of course it helps. Should you get help if you're in the situation? 100%. You have the right to. You should not be discriminated against because of your immigration status. That should not be a concern. It unfortunately commonly is a concern, especially when the person you're with is threatening you with deportation and you don't know your rights. So how do we handle it? Well, that's what the affidavit is for. We really detailed the abuse that she suffered. Again, the 5 W's and the how: who, what, when, where, why, how, explaining the different scenarios with as much detail as possible. And that's all. I think she had submitted a psychological evaluation initially with the prior attorney. I honestly don't remember off the top of my head. It's a very good idea to do. I think she didn't have health insurance when she started with us, so she might not have been able to afford to get one if she didn't. But it's recommended you go see a therapist regardless because of the issues that come along with abuse. But even if you don't have that, as long as you're credible and they believe you, that's really all that matters. So those were some of the real key points in her case. So after the VAWA was approved, there was a lot of confusion because when she hired us, I sent a notice to USCIS saying that we've been retained as her attorney. We want to substitute in. Please send us all the notices. Well, USCIS never acknowledged, and this is again common, never acknowledged that they received our substitution of counsel. And when we tried to find, so when I would call them for her, the 1-800 number, they wouldn't talk to me because I wasn't counsel of record. And it's because of the privacy law, they can only talk to her about limited things. But she kept trying to confirm they got my substitution of counsel because when you file for a VAWA, when you have an attorney, you don't get any of the mail. They sent all the notices, including all your work permit, your green card, to the attorney. And we were, concerned about the prior attorney getting her things. So we wanted to make sure that it was coming to us. I must have sent out 3 or 4 times the substitution of counsel letter to different places because I filed requests with the VAWA hotline saying, where do I send this? They told me some weird address in Louisiana. I was told by another place to send it somewhere else. When we called, they told us somewhere else, but nobody ever acknowledged receiving it, which USCIS doesn't send like an acknowledgement. Okay, we know you're the new attorney. They just kind of substitute you in. So you have to continuously, be on top of it. And it's you have a right to attorney of your choosing. You're allowed to change attorneys. They're not supposed to make this as difficult as they do sometimes. But this was really stressful. And on top of that, we didn't know where the application was. And she was also had an issue because her father was very sick back in Jamaica and she needed to visit him. We were able to get her a travel document, but those expire and people do get very nervous traveling on them, especially if you are outside the country. When your application is denied, they might not let you back in. So it's risky. And I mean, we didn't think her application would be denied, but you never know. So she wanted to do a request to expedite her case. And we had the evidence that showed the urgency and that they usually granted on. But the problem was, where do we send it? We kept trying to send it to different places. We had to get the congressperson involved. But eventually it does appear that they did get her expedite request, because I do think, given the time between when the VAWA was approved and when the green card was approved, was pretty short in comparison to others. And I will say also, the VAWA was approved very shortly after we got the request for evidence, which was a lengthy request for evidence, which is a testament to how we responded. So I know that was a lot. We have another question here. Let's see. I got a 212H waiver granted and adjusted my status through USCIS for a CIMT/deportable van. DHS come after me. My crime was 30 years old. Ooh, that's a rough one. That's strange. I would, Moses, Moses, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I would need to take a look at that. If you got a waiver for a CIMT, and you got a green card, I don't know why they would come to deport you. Hopefully you're still in the US and you can either contact us or another immigration attorney to kind of get to the bottom of this, but that doesn't sound right to me unless there's more to the story. Because once you get the waiver, they can't come after you again for that. But if you've been a permanent resident for the requisite time period, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 years, this is actually one of the reasons why I recommend people file for citizenship, if you're eligible, because then no matter what, they can't come after you. But yeah, you would have to contact me privately for us to kind of figure out what's going on, and if they um, if you're what you can do, because hopefully if you're sending me this message, I'm thinking you're not detained, but that's really all I can gather at this point. So, that really is all for today. I know I went through a lot. This was a very big case, a lot of things going on. I recommend going back and if this case sounds familiar to you, um, sounds anything like your situation and how to deal with it. We deal with these unfortunately a lot, and we know how to. We're very good at it because we see these patterns. We know how to respond to these issues, but it's always difficult. And the sooner that you engage an attorney who's well versed in this, the better off you're going to be. Because I have a lot of these cases where I'm fixing mistakes after the fact, which is what I had to do here. Fortunately, we were able to do all of that for her. So I am very, very excited. Okay, not in removal. Okay, yeah, I would have to again. I would definitely probably have to do a file review to find out what's going on in your situation. Um, so my contact information is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So feel free to reach out to me. Be happy to see what we can do. And before I go, quick reminder, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you are watching. If you found this video to be helpful, drop us a comment, let us know what you liked, hit that share button or the save button so that you and anyone that may find this to be of value does not miss any more of our lives. Of course, you can always watch it on repeat. That is all for today. I might be back later today at immigration court, hoping to get a positive result. If we get a result at all today, it's my first individual hearing since the new presidential administration took over, so shall be interesting. Otherwise, thank you all for watching and have a great day.